This is the Mavic 2 Pro. It has been a workhorse drone for 3 years, but the Mavic 3 has arrived. There's one huge reason why you may not want to upgrade, and of course, there's a lot of reasons why you might want to upgrade, all except for the price. Hey, my name is Jake, and I create content here to help solo creators on the go. So I do lots of drone, camera, and lens reviews, and I do tips and tutorials on how to use those so you can tell better stories. If that's something that interests you, consider subscribing. Today we're comparing the Mavic 2 Pro and the Mavic 3. Both amazing drones. This one's 3 years old and no longer in production, but there is still one big reason you may not want to upgrade if you have the Mavic 2 Pro to the Mavic 3. And not just talking about the price of the Mavic 3, which, yes, it's expensive. Video quality, the Mavic 3 definitely wins. The larger sensor, a little more dynamic range, and up to 5.1K, up to 50 frames a second, which is huge. Plus you also get 4K 120 frames a second if you want it, whereas this is limited to 4K 30. That's it. You don't get any more than that, but definitely bigger. The quality of both of these drones they both shoot really, really nice video, but the extra resolution gives you a little more room to punch in without losing anything and still get a nice full 4K image. And the fact that you can shoot 4K 120 frames a second in D-Log is really nice, and it gives you just a lot of extra flexibility in how you want to shoot things and what you want to do with it. Both these drones shoot 10-bit D-Log color, which is amazing. They both have a physical mechanical aperture, which is fantastic if you're shooting in dynamic changing environments, because it allows you to adjust things on the fly without having to bring the drone back down. When it comes to low light, both of these drones perform really well, but the Mavic 3 definitely has an edge because it does have a larger sensor. Maybe about a stop of light, or maybe not 2/3 of a stop of light more, but they both do perform really well in low light. And one little side note, it's really not that big a deal, but this does have 8 GB of built-in memory, so if you happen to forget an SD card, you might be able to get a shot or two. I mean, 3 or 4, depending on how you shoot, but it fills up with 4K really, really fast. This has nothing, so if you don't have an SD card, you're just out of luck. And on the imaging department, and it also goes with the physical design of the drones, in sport mode, the upward gimbal tilt on this is limited because of how far back it is. It only can go up so far. I've found that extremely frustrating in a lot of cases because I've been wanting to chase something at full speed sport mode and I can't because the gimbal will drop down a lot. This does not have that problem. This will go full speed forward sport mode, provided you're not hitting a lot of headwind or something really buffeting the drone, and the gimbal won't drop down at all, which is incredible if you want to do things like follow something that's moving really fast. For photos, the Mavic 2 Pro shoots 20 megapixel stills thanks to its 1-inch CMOS sensor. The Mavic 3, 20 megapixel stills thanks to its 4/3 inch sensor. The Mavic 3 has a little bit better dynamic range than the Mavic 2, really makes a big difference for photographers if you're wanting to do photo work. They both shoot great photos and really editable. The Mavic 3 does have a little bit better dynamic range than the Mavic 2 Pro does as far as photos. This is a 12-ish stops, this is 12.8 stops, so just a little bit more. Not a huge difference, but it is noticeable if you're shooting in extreme environments. One more thing in imaging that the Mavic 3 has over the Mavic 2 is the little zoom camera. I don't really count it because it's not, the quality isn't really there yet. Like I wouldn't use it in anything professionally, but it is kind of cool that you can get closer to things or at least find things a little easier. And you can get some usable stuff out of it. You're just limited to the default standard colors, no 10-bit or anything like that, but you can use it for a few things. I just would never use it professionally in any way. When it comes to obstacle avoidance, which is especially useful in intelligent flight modes, and yes, both of these have active track, the Mavic 2 does have 360-degree obstacle avoidance, but it's only active in intelligent flight modes and tripod mode. Anything else, you only get forward, backward, up, and down obstacle avoidance. You don't get any side obstacle avoidance, whereas the Mavic 3 has full-time 360-degree obstacle avoidance, and it is vastly, dramatically improved over the Mavic 2. Now, they will both still struggle with small things like branches with no leaves on them and small wires, so you still should be aware of what you're flying around and make sure you're not going to run into anything like that. When it comes to intelligent flight modes, here's where there is a lot of difference. This has Active Track 3, which is a huge improvement over Active Track 2, or Active Track, whatever's in this one, I don't remember off the top of my head. But this will Active Track well, it does okay, but I do find it's a little bit harder for it to stay with a subject, whereas this does a much better job of sticking with a subject and really locking on to it. Something that's different on the Mavic 3 than the Mavic 2 Pro for active track is how you do active track. For the Mavic 2 Pro, you have to go into active track mode, whereas the Mavic 3, it's basically there all the time. You just select your subject by drawing a square around them, and then you will go into active track mode. Then you can select from active track, spotlight, or POI. Those are different active track modes, but that's how simple and how easy it is. And to get out, you push the little green X and you're done. The other thing that this sports, this does not, is the APAS system, which is where it will find flight paths through obstacles as it's active tracking. Very nice. I still don't trust it 100%. I'm always a little leery of obstacle avoidance with drones, but it does do a really good job. They also have things like point of interest mode. This has hyperlapse features. This does not yet. However, that is supposed to be coming in a future firmware update. It just hasn't been released yet, but they did release active track for it. And the other thing that this will have in the future is master shots. So master shots gives you like a 2-minute long video clip of a whole bunch of different shots that gives you a lot of ability to be able to grab shots from it. Or if you want to use the app, you can just edit out a 15 to 30 second little clip of a bunch of different clips of this thing creating shots for you, which is nice. I don't know how much I use it. The Air 2S, I use it a little bit, but not that much. I prefer a little bit more of a manual control guy, but yeah. But here's where the Mavic 2 Pro still beats out the Mavic 3. The Mavic 2 Pro has waypoints. So if you do things like mapping or missions where you go to a place several times to be able to like document the progress of a building being built, waypoints are where it's at. Now DJI has said they are not adding waypoints to the Mavic 3, which means we'll have to wait until they release the SDK and a third-party app developer creates waypoints like Litchi or something like that, but they don't release the SDK until about a year after they've released the drone. So we've probably got a ways to go on that. However, I think eventually waypoints will come to the Mavic 3, but if that's something you use often, you're gonna wanna stick with the Mavic 2 Pro for now. And then we come to the differences between these two drones. This drone, I feel like, is a bit quieter than this drone. There's the Mavic 2 Pro. It's exactly 1 arm's length from me. We'll do the Mavic 3 here in just a sec. When it comes to battery life, there is, of course, a very big difference. For this, you get 20-ish, 21 minutes, maybe, if you're doing okay. I've flown this as cold as 40 below zero. It's had no problems. It's not nearly that cold today, thank God. But it has been flown at that temperatures and never had an issue. You got to keep an eye on your battery temperature. You got to keep your batteries warm before you take off. You take some precautions, but it does fly that cold. This, I haven't had the chance to fly that cold yet, but it does fly. I've flown it at 25 below zero. It's had no issues, so I have no reason to believe it wouldn't have any problem flying at 40 below zero either. Hopefully, I don't get the chance to test that this winter. But this has 46 minutes of battery life. Okay, not 46, maybe 38 minutes, depending on how you fly it. On a day like this, 35, 36 minutes, because it's not that warm. But it has significantly longer battery life, to the point where you kind of start to wonder what else you need to shoot. It really flies for a lot longer when you're using it. And the batteries also, and another big upgrade to these is that this, you have to use the charger, whereas this can charge via USB-C power delivery in the drone, which is fantastic. If you're somebody like me who's on the go and you use power packs, power stations, battery packs, or anything like that, you can actually recharge the battery on the Mavic 3 without having to have the specific charger. And then we come to flight speed and characteristics. Now the Mavic 2 has tripod mode, which is something I absolutely loved because it was such a fine, very easy to control and get really super slow, super smooth cinematic shots. That I really did love about this drone. I still love about this drone. This doesn't have tripod mode, it has cine mode, but it's not as slow as I would like as it's definitely not as slow as tripod mode is, but it has cine mode and it's not bad. When it comes to speed, however, there's a big difference. This will ascend and descend at twice the speed of the Mavic 2 Pro and as far as forward, backward speed in sport mode, you can get about 45, maybe 46 miles an hour out of Mavic 2. Whereas this, I've gotten up to 47 miles an hour in sport mode, which seems insanely fast, but it's much faster. But when it comes to your ascending and descending, it is a dramatic difference in how fast this responds. Another thing that's really interesting is how much more stable the Mavic 3 is in the air. It will just sit there, hover. It's like it's on a tripod, just like the Air 2S, the Air 2. The Mavic 2 drifts a lot more. And I used to think this thing was insanely solid when I got it because it was much more solid than other drones I've flown. But this makes this look like it's drifting all over the place. And still, this doesn't drift that bad. Another thing with the Mavic 2 is this little Gimbal Guard thing, which is kind of floppy and kind of weird to stick it in there. You gotta fit it over the top of the gimbal, push it back in there, and then you can kind of click it in and lock it in place, which is fine. With the Mavic 3, the gimbal actually locks after you turn it off, and then you use the Gimbal Guard and you just slide it basically over the entire thing. Of course, you fold the legs up and stuff first, and then strap it around the back. I didn't like this at first, but now I've gotten used to it, and actually I like it quite a bit. It does a really good job. One bad thing though is I put some tape on my arms here because these rear arms tend to hit the gimbal a little bit. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I just put some black gaffer's tape on there to protect the gimbal arms. Doesn't seem to hurt anything. It's been working fine ever since. Now, if you want to see how the Mavic 3 compares to other drones, click or tap right there. I put together a small playlist. I'll see you in one of those videos. As always, if you have questions, ask me in the comments below or join my live stream Wednesday nights at 4 p.m. Alaska time, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's getting really cold. The sun is setting. I'm going to go home. Cheers.